this one. Okay, cool. We only have 5-6 minutes. Anda masih menyaksikan agenda Awani. Kita masih membicarakan tentang keusahawanan sosial. Maksudnya membantu masyarakat sambil membawa keuntungan sebagai satu perniagaan. Dalam konteks ini, saya ingin terus berbicara bahasa Inggeris. I'd like now to go to the fact that if we don't think as a market, then we're not really market savvy. And the market that is impendingly in front of us is the ASEAN Economic Community. 620 million people, trillions of GDP. We're only trading 20% between ourselves, and all these things are way room for improvement. And why do social entrepreneurs and social enterprise lead in this particular area? It's almost a green, maybe a bit of brown somewhere, but it's a lot of green fields. So, Wolfgang, from a financial perspective, these are potentials.
These are potentials, and honestly, when we look at the global scenery of impact investing, the sectors which are growing fastest in this 50 billion industry at the moment are sectors around agriculture, which is very well needed here in Southeast Asia as well, in Asia in general, sustainable agriculture, including smallholder farmers. It's sectors like education. I think in the educational fields there's huge opportunities, especially if we combine them with technology and maybe can leapfrog education, especially at the bottom of the pyramid. That's a second sector in this impact investing space, which is growing tremendously and which has tremendous potential here in Asia as well. I would also say the whole healthcare sector, which we've seen is doing extremely well, not only globally, but is doing well also here in Asia, where we see that there is a need to bring affordable healthcare and more affordable social environmental solutions in general to the people who want high quality but can't afford the super expensive services. And that's a sweet spot for social entrepreneurs. That's where they have to be innovative, that's where they have to be creative, that's where they have to create new models. And what's most interesting to us, honestly, what we see over the last, I would say 12 to 24 months, is that more and more companies come into that space because they are looking for growth, they're looking for innovation, and they don't find this in their normal R&D channels anymore. They want to have new ideas about what business models could work, as you said, at these large numbers of people who are currently not served. And they are doing a lot at the moment. They are starting small impact investing funds to explore innovative ideas, and if ideas should work, they integrate them in their core business. And that's an area where I see huge potential for this region, but also globally, honest.
I wanted to go somewhere else, but you said the magic word of ideas. You know, it's always German precision engineering, stuff like that. But ideas, I personally believe, having been delving into this kind of discussion for quite a number of years, that in Malaysia and other ASEAN countries, there's a lot of ideas. But somehow, ideas going to that first group of startup entrepreneurs, there's always like a deep chasm, you know. So how do you get beyond? If we look at the region, if we take the example of Singapore, it's a very developed nation with a very high income per capita for everyone. But you just go 1 hour's drive from there, up the peninsula, or you fly anywhere 2 hours radius. Wow, it's a completely different picture. So ideas, to me, is the ones that can bridge that. But you know, funding is always an issue in a lot of people's mind in these parts of the world. They think that they don't have any collateral, so I don't get any money, for example. But then this is what called impact investing that looks directly at ideas and innovation. And ideas can be turned into wealth. So I guess that's one of the main divide which we got to cross. I mean, in terms of what you have been saying, right?
Yes, and just to give you an example of that, there's one organization we're considering investing in Cambodia that is building out microgrids. So in Cambodia, it's basically the country is split up into a number, over 200 different areas. What's been developed so far is maybe electrification of one village or a couple of villages within a whole area. And this entrepreneur has come back from a successful career in the U.S. to Cambodia, he's Cambodian, to really acquire one of those to start, build that out, and literally rent trucks, train a team of electricians to extend the distribution lines to the rest of the license area. And Cambodia has about 80% unelectrified people in their rural population. And of course, after he does this with one area, he will continue and acquire new areas and extend that to help.
So is the only barrier, the main barrier, is actually only awareness and the ability to match that to daring to experiment. For example, there's a lot of generation gap issues in this country too. You know, if you go out to the rural areas, you know, land that was before worked upon by the older generation, younger generation just want to be like Ihon. They want to be somewhere in swanky Cyberjaya, you know, and Mamsi status. And
we do go to rural areas.
Yeah, but you don't stay there. So what if we mesh microcredit and solar panels, just like what Bangladesh did? So we don't have to rely on the centralized grid system for energy, because that's not cost effective for the bottom 40%. The moment the fuel prices, the coal prices goes up, then electricity tariff will have to go up. But if you rely on renewable energy to generate wealth creation, especially in the outskirts, then that will solve a problem, for example. But awareness and matching that to daring.
I would say awareness on two levels. You said one thing which is very important. You need the ideas, but there's at least two other components which you need. And one is experienced talent. And we're missing that a lot in that impact investing space. Experienced talent is very often attracted, and that's for me the third component, by available funds. So the moment that real money, sovereign wealth funds, pension funds say, yes, we really want to solve things out in these rural areas. And once they make money available in impact investing funds, what we'll see is that we will attract these top talents, because there is a movement which clearly goes in the direction of people who look for more meaningful jobs. A lot of people have made a lot of money and they want a job where they can combine, and that's a perfect space for impact investing or social enterprise. But apart from the ideas, they need the money which they can use to then do things. And that's what we see again and again.
Always about the money. Ihon, I have to close 30 seconds. Please sum it up for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you definitely hit the nail on the head with all the things that you said about ASEAN, for example. The Prime Minister has come out and say, what will happen if ASEAN is an integrated economy, creating a more equitable economy? So these are big questions that we don't know the answers to, and this is where we want more innovation. But the last point that you mentioned on is that apart from awareness, there are three things that we see as big problems: personal, cultural, and institutional. And these are the three things that Magic exists to try to...
You have to come again. That's the promise.
Well, I hope so.
And Raya and Wolfgang, when they were around. Thank you so much. I guess the challenge for Magic is, would they be there at the World Economic Forum in Davos next year to argue stuff like this? So, because if you want funding, that's where it is. So, terima kasih banyak. Hantarkan pandangan anda sendiri kepada pelbagai platform yang Astro Awani ada, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, ataupun terus muat turun aplikasi Monale, iOS dan Android. Sekian, selamat malam. Terima kasih. Jumpa lagi. Thank you so much. Anda masih menyaksikan agenda Awani. Kita masih membincangkan bagaimana untuk memberi kembali kepada masyarakat, tapi pada masa yang sama mencipta kemakmuran. Dalam konteks itu mencipta perniagaan dan keusahawanan. Oleh itu saya ingin terus berbicara bahasa Inggeris. Raya, you have to give us the gender balance and more here. And I've always been hearing in efforts like this, maybe we don't see it directly as social entrepreneurship, but if I look at the microfinance world, Professor Yunus, for example, in Grameen Bank, the rate of return of loan, of paying back the loan, is about 99% over, and most of them are lady entrepreneurs, for example. So we can't take away the gender equation from this, Raya.
Thank you very much. No, it's certainly true in the success rates of microfinance and women entrepreneurs paying back their loans at a very admirable rate. I think as the microfinance industry matures, we're asking ourselves sort of what's next in that space. And while my background is in impact investing, so that's really doing debt and equity investments in social enterprises, particularly in the Asia region. So I've been in Singapore for 10 years. Is really around what does it take for these organizations to go from small to through the scaling phase and to get much larger. And now we're hearing that working capital is a significant need in the region, in large part because most banks only lend if there's collateral. Yes. And a lot of these entrepreneurs don't have collateral, so their businesses reach a certain limit where it's difficult for them to access growth capital. That's where impact investing can come in, especially in the growth stage or a little bit later stage than the startup stage where Magic is working. So if it doesn't look at
collateral, then how do you work that? What do you look at?
So I have to say impact investing can be a little bit more impact first, or you can have funds that are more financial first. Those that are more impact first may take slightly lower rates of return, but still very much expect their capital to be returned, and usually with at least some nominal return on either interest or from an exit from equity. And so what we would look at from a working capital perspective is basically a more holistic analysis of the company, its management team, and its ability to pay back and service that loan just like you would any other loan. So a lot of the 13 investments that we've done in Asia are loans. They can be anywhere from 5% to 12-15%. So also healthy returns, but that return is dependent on the organization and what it's able to manage in terms of servicing that loan, as well as what the interest rate is in countries. So we balance it out according to the cost of capital.
In the conventional market of finance, for example, there's always a provision for bad loans, and you expect certain loans to be in that category in a percentage way. So how do you work it in the social entrepreneurship financing? Because it's about values too. And I keep hearing social enterprises or social entrepreneurship or otherwise that we don't celebrate failures. Failures is not tolerable, but especially for social entrepreneurship, because there's no manual and it's not exactly a well-trodden path in these parts of the world. Of course, there will be mistakes here and there, but how do you factor all this in? Because sometimes a group of people is doing well, then they make one bad mistake. It reflects badly on their financial statements and stuff. But you know that if only they get past that, there's a huge potential here. So how do you factor that into counting for risks and stuff like that?
Sure. So I think you hit it on the head in terms of talking about risk. And sometimes the risk that is taken is an equity-like risk, but sometimes the structure of an impact investment is in the form of a loan, but it may be a convertible loan so that as the company grows and progresses and is a stronger, more profitable company, then you would convert that into an equity stake. Or perhaps it just stands as a straight loan, but it might have some sort of revenue share or profit share as a way to participate in the upside. But I think as we've worked with Magic and certainly around the region, there is risk in investing in social enterprises. But if you don't take that risk, and if there's not capital willing to do that, you're not going to get the larger social enterprises that can have the tremendous scale and impact that we're looking for.
What kind of skill and impact are we talking about? Because to many people still, they can't imagine what kind of social enterprise, what kind of brands are we thinking about when we're talking about all this, for example. So if you can give us a maybe overview of the levels, is it SMEs kind of, market first, or which area of the supply chain?
In Malaysia.
Yes.
So Malaysia is quite interesting. So we're talking about risk earlier. One of the things in Malaysia is that we are an emerging market, as you mentioned, and which means that the risks are huge, not only in the private sector, but more so in the social enterprises, right? So what we're seeing is people are trying to take the risk, but they're trying to take it very carefully. We see a trend where social enterprises in Malaysia remain really small, but then there are great stories, and they're usually led by young people, which is both good and bad. Good because we're seeing a new generation of young people coming out, pioneering new stuff. BGBG is a great example for uni students who wanted to initially start an eco-friendly resort, but realized that it takes too much capital. So what they did was they started tinkering at home waste to turn it into beautiful products. And now BGBG produce beautiful products from waste. On the other hand, you have the big social enterprises, but still don't see themselves as social enterprise. And they generally are led by the older generation who have had experience in the corporate world. So Julia Chong is a great example who runs TLC. So TLC is a domestic product, currently in a lot of the retail store across Malaysia. And she started off because she thought, I have all this experience managing supply chain. I may as well, come out and do my own thing. And so when she first started TLC, all the dividends go to charity. Before she started going, actually, there's more I could do. So she's now created products that's green range. So it's biodegradable plastic, ethical and sustainable materials and ingredients, and so on and so forth.
Great.
And dividends all go to charities.
I have to go for the last break, but once we are back, I want to scope it to ASEAN, because sometimes a country or nation state, it limits the possibilities and the opportunities, for example. But if we look at 620 million people, the bottom 40% is a real issue, because inequality is huge, and that's create a lot of space for social entrepreneurs to come into and play a role. So let's discuss that. I'll tap into all your expertise, Singapore especially. Singapore has social entrepreneurship. Okay, so I'm still thinking that. But we go for the break and we come back after this. Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera. Saya sudah pun gembira berbicara dengan tamu-tamu saya. Keusahawanan sosial nampak macam terma yang kompleks, tapi sebenarnya tidak, ya. Bagaimana kita mengadakan semangat keusahawanan, mencipta kemakmuran, tetapi bukan saja semata-mata berdasarkan keuntungan, tetapi juga untuk memberikan kebaikan sosial, dan itu begitu rapat dan sinonim dengan budaya dan cara kita di Asia, terutamanya di Asia Tenggara. Dalam konteks itu saya ingin berbicara dalam bahasa Inggeris. I would like to speak in English kerana hari ini saya ada orang-orang yang hebat bersama dengan saya. I have Ihon Chan right at the end there. He's somebody who's been identified by magic, not the magic show, but the magic focus to help spur more technopreneurs in this country. For example, he's looking at social entrepreneurship, and he's a director there. And but we're going to get more stories about why he came back. He's doing so well overseas. But we also have people from far, far away that have kidnapped to be on this show because they're supposed to have an event in KLCC. Closest to me, Wolfgang Heffenmeier, the founder of the Future Makers, and of course the co-founder, Raya. Thank you so much for making time. But before I go to our overseas guests, Ihon would have to take this task of social entrepreneurship is there, but it's not really there in a lot of people's mind in Malaysia. Some are even still confused to see that how could you really focus on social when you are doing business for profit, for example. So, but in Asia, we have always been told from small that you must give back. So I would like you to start from that particular premise, that can we really give back by doing business? Wouldn't profit, be at the center of everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Malaysia, it's really interesting when we look at social enterprises. Generally, they're either very nascent, so there are people who came out to wanting to become a social entrepreneur and start a social enterprise. So these are still very, very new social enterprises that we're seeing. On the other hand, we're seeing a lot of larger social enterprises, but they still do not identify themselves as a social enterprise, either because they don't want to or because they don't know this thing called social enterprises in Malaysia.
Is it about business first, or is it about wanting to do good? Because sometimes when I read stories of social enterprises and social entrepreneurs, they just talk about wanting to help society. But because they want to help, they need to have capacity and they need to have resources. So they build businesses.
Yep.
So how does it work? Because sometimes, like you say, and you pointed out that I might not know that I want to be a social entrepreneur, but I'm doing it already, for example.
So it's a bit of both. It's partly a means to an end, but also the other way around, right? So the way we look at social enterprise at Magic, we have taken a quite liberal view because social enterprise in Malaysia is still quite nascent. So what we look at is, number one, we want to make sure that the enterprise has a social or environmental mission at the core of everything that they do. And the second one is around the business model. We want them to have some kind of business activity with the aim of becoming financially sustainable.
Okay. This show is all about stories, and I think if you go to the futuremakers.net, you'll see a portal full of stories. So, but the storytellers are here. So maybe I'll let you guys tell the story, because I think in Malaysia, because we are a developing nation, you know, we have always been focusing on industrialization, and now only we're looking at knowledge economy. So sometimes we don't have the chance to start out as an entrepreneur, but maybe just like you guys, we can leave the comfort zone of our salaried work, and, you know, and then go and do this, for example. Whoever wants to start first.
Well, I mean, I'm not a social entrepreneur myself, but over the last 10 years, I invested in lots of social entrepreneurs all over the world.
Okay.
So before I started Future Makers, I was working for the princely family of Liechtenstein and managing a global team who was trying to identify young, strongly growing companies which would call themselves social enterprises. And we have helped them in their strong growth phases. To give you an example, maybe then it becomes a little bit more practical. We've done things in Africa, for example, and in Kenya, one of the biggest issues is that there's still 3.5 million kids who don't have access to primary education, high quality primary education. And so people there, social entrepreneurs, said, we will not solve this with a charitable model where we have a couple of schools and give a little bit money each year. So they said, we need a company that can scale and can do something at a large size. So the team around Bridge International Academies built a system where, yes, they started with 2 schools and 500 students, but today, after only 6 years, they have a model where they reach every day 100,000 school kids in Kenya in their 300 schools, and they have used technology to upskill teachers. So every teacher basically has a tablet, and they have taken the Kenyan curriculum but improved that significantly, helped teachers through their tablets to prepare themselves for schools, use this in the classroom to have very structured, high-quality education, have used technology like the mobile payment system, which is very much used in Kenya, so that each and every parent pays through their mobile phones for their kids' education. They pay very little amounts, very small amounts per month, but these small amounts add up, and one of these schools works profitable after you have 300 kids in one of these schools. So what Bridge International Academies managed over the last 5, 6, 7 years is not only to provide very affordable, high-quality primary education, but they do this for 100,000 kids, already working profitable in 80% of their schools, and are growing this system now over the next years way beyond Kenya.
I wonder if that's the connection. Prince Alfred of Liechtenstein was in Awani a few years ago. So I'll go back to that connection. So they even have a futurist kind of a group of people looking forward to the future and working backwards. So I'll go back to that. But this is no way a reflection of the gender balance, because we will give Raya a chance to speak. I have to go for the first break. But once we are back, because I remember when I was discussing Kenya, either at the World Innovation Forum, World Islamic Economic Forum, or even in World Economic Forum in Davos, it's the ladies that brings the biggest lead to any bottom of 40% community. And the mobile phone, it works to have credit on the phone because there's no physical coins or notes of money. And the man who likes to take money and spend it on unproductive things can't do it because it's on the phone. So these are the things that we can look at, the stories behind. And then I'll come back to Ihon and what do we want to do with social entrepreneurship in Malaysia? Where would Magic want us to be? That after this short break.